How's it going out there? Arthur Rashad here. Road to Exoneration, where regular individuals come together to help someone that may have been wrongfully convicted. If you would like to be a part of this group, you can always send me an email, arthurrashad.com, subscribe here, or just keep up with the podcast. Keep trying to do the right thing with helping people. So this week is part 2 of the Daniel Coleman story from February 21st, 1987. If you haven't watched part 1, I would ask you to go back and watch part 1 first, just so you can keep up with the story. In part 1 also, I said Wilmington, Delaware, and I actually meant Newark, Delaware, which is where the crime happened. So this week, we'll look at what Daniel Coleman's side of the story was. So Daniel Coleman at the time lived on Cleveland Avenue inside of Newark, Delaware. His argument is that he woke up around 4:30 a.m., which is when he set his alarm clock. His story is that he had to be to work at 6 a.m. in the morning. He remembers setting the alarm clock at 4:30. He gets up at 4:30, eats breakfast, takes a shower, moseys around a little bit, and leaves at 5:30. And leaves either 5:30 or a couple minutes before 5:30. What he was wearing at the time is important. He was wearing white sneakers, blue jeans, and a flannel shirt. I've asked him why he did not wear a coat at the time, which is important. And he said because the weather was pretty warm and he didn't need a coat on that particular morning. Now, I went back and researched this to see what the weather was February 21st, 1987 in Newark, Delaware. I haven't been able to find it. So if you can find what the weather was February 21st, 1987, please put it in the comments below or send me an email. Put it in the comments below would be better so that we can all help each other out and feed off each other. So he leaves roughly before 5:30 a.m. When he leaves, he walks down Cleveland Avenue. After Cleveland Avenue, he crosses over into the parking lot and stops at a McDonald's. Now, this McDonald's is important because Daniel's argument is that when he stopped at the McDonald's, he stopped to get coffee at the time, but the McDonald's was closed. When the McDonald's was closed, that's when the police officer stopped Daniel because he matched the description of the kidnapping that happened at the ATM down the street. So Daniel Coleman gets stopped at the ATM. He said he tried to get in the ATM. He tried to get it in the McDonald's. It was closed. Now, I've asked him, well, you went to work the day before. If this is your regular routine and stop at this McDonald's, then how is it that it was open the day before, but it wasn't open now? So his argument was on that Saturday, he had to be to work at 6 a.m. But on that Friday, he had to be to work at 7 a.m. So his argument is it takes me about 15 minutes to get from Cleveland Avenue to work, and that's stopping at the McDonald's. So what we would look at is on the day before, if he did the same route, the McDonald's would have been open probably at that time at 6:30 rather than 5:30, which is the time that he allegedly left. So he gets stopped at that time. When he stopped, he's questioned by the officer. Where are you going? Where are you coming from? What's your name? What's your date of birth? The officer then calls down to the officer with the victim at the ATM. The victim gets transported to the McDonald's where she says that is not the person that kidnapped her because 1, he didn't have a coat on, and 2, his facial hair was different at the time. He's then released. Right before he's released, Daniel Coleman, and remember this, Daniel Coleman says the officer was listening to his radio about a transmission that was going on his radio. But at the time, he didn't know what that was, but it'll be important in our future series. So he leaves, goes off to work, gets to work, and he arrives at work before 6 o'clock, which was his start time, according to his then supervisor, who testified in court. Yes, Daniel Coleman was at work on time. Now, after the police officers went back and viewed the ATM pictures, they said that they identified Daniel Coleman, who was a person that was stopped at McDonald's. So they go to his workplace, ask him to come back down to the station. He goes back down to the station for interrogation. Now, the officers, as you seen last week, the officer's argument was that he admitted to the crime after making several statements. Daniel Coleman's argument is, no, they tricked me, they coerced me into making a confession. His argument is that they would ask him, well, do you ever go down to Main Street? And he says, yes, I go down to Main Street all the time. I live in Newark. And then they asked him, well, do you ever go down there with a female? And he said, yes, I'll go down there with a female, of course. And then they asked him, well, have you ever touched that female sexually? And he says, yes, I've touched that female sexually. And then they said, well, when did you kidnap that female? And he says, hold on, I'm talking about my girlfriend that I go down to Main Street with, not this victim that you're alleging was kidnapped from the ATM. And then they say, no, you were just talking about the victim. We just asked you. You were down at Main Street with her. And he says, no, I wasn't talking about the victim. I was talking about my girlfriend at the time who lived on Cleveland Avenue. So then they say, well, you already admitted to it because you said you were talking about the victim. So it's a back and forth. It gets kind of shady. Nothing was recorded at the time. Daniel Coleman didn't sign anything in the confessions. And actually, during the trial, before the trial, they had a suppression hearing where Daniel Coleman's lawyer attempted to have any admission to the crime thrown out. So that's part 2 of this series. If you haven't watched part 1, watch part 1. You'll catch up with part 1. Then you'll go to part 2. Again, if you could find out what the weather was at that particular time, February 21st, 1987, that would help. Arthur Rashad, you can follow me at arthurrashad.com, or you can go to Arthur Rashad Support Group for Children of Incarcerated Parents, or you can just, send a message. Subscribe if you want. I don't like telling people what to do. Love yourself, love others, continue to help each other. Take care.